as the president of the League of Lehigh County, I welcome you along with our board members to our third and final candidate event of the selection season. Bienvenidos and gracias por venir. This event does not happen without the help of our members who have worked on questions, booking locations, communicating with candidates in the press releases, organizing audience questions, and all that goes into creating a successful candidate, including getting all the microphones set. So you have no idea how much time goes into this. I want to just acknowledge some of our board members. Rochelle Kaplan, who is a timekeeper, is also the state director for the League for Voter Services. Terry Purdy is our special projects director. She handles our website. If you've ever seen our website, it's awesome. Michelle Grofner. Where's Michelle? Oh, there she is. She's someone just called her a MacGyver. She worked out the mics. She also is the editor of the Morning Call Voters Guide. So it's her work that gets you the information you need for Election Day. We have Molly Fast. Raise your hand. She's our immediate past president, and she's on the state board for diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. Donna and Charles here? No? I don't see them. Okay. Let's see. We have, I was going to tell you about two other people that usually are here who distribute the voter's guide as well as our government directory, if any of you have seen that. And of course, we have our moderator for tonight, Barb Williams, which I'll introduce her in just a second. I also want to thank the Lehigh County Conference of Churches for graciously opening their doors for us for this event. We do appreciate your time, your hospitality, and getting the room ready for us. Also tonight, we were supposed to have 3 Allentown School District students from Building 21. 2 are sick. So one is going to ask the 3 questions that the students were going to ask. And she's a very, very great girl for doing so. Accompanying her is Ms. Shannon Salter from the Allentown School District. What is your official title now, Shannon?
Oh my goodness. Well, I am the lead social studies curriculum designer, one of the lead social studies curriculum designers for the district, and the partnership coordinator for Building 21 High School.
Okay, and we're going to be working with her, getting the students involved in things. Barb Connolly, raise your hand. She is our Director of Community Outreach and Voter Services for Lehigh County. If you have something you want us to attend, you want us to table, you want us to come talk, Barb is the one you contact. Okay. All right. Now, you also see, I think Barb mentioned about the index cards?
Yeah.
Okay. The index cards are up here, or some of our members will be deliver them if you raise your hand. Tonight, we want to thank, of course, our candidates for saying yes to our invitation to debate. Not every candidate says yes, so they are brave, they are courageous, and they've taken the time to prepare for tonight. So we thank you both very much, and we wish you both great luck. Now it's time to introduce our moderator for tonight, Barbara Williams. Barbara's our treasurer. She's a longtime member and a longtime moderator. She's retired from the Allentown School District. She did teach at William Allen and Harrisburg. And she will let both our candidates and audience know if you don't follow the rules. Having been a teacher, very good at that.
Don't make me come after you.
So without any further ado, I introduce Barb, and I wish the candidates good luck.
Thank you, Mary. All right, well, Mary stole a little bit of my intro, but I just want to say hello to everybody and welcome. My name is Barbara Williams. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters. League is a nonpartisan group. One of its goals is to assist community groups to inform and educate the public on voting, current issues, and tonight, these 2 candidates' views on those issues. Again, our candidates, I'd like to introduce Mr. Joshua Siegel, who is a Democrat, Mr. Robert Smith, who is a Republican, and they're both running to represent you in Harrisburg for the newly formed 22nd District. I want to thank you guys for coming tonight. I know you're really busy. We know it's a busy time. We also want to thank the Conference of Churches for granting us permission to use this facility for this venue. Thank you for coming tonight, and thank you to our student who is also here. Okay, I'm going to go over the format for the program. We are going to be introduced each candidate, They then will have a 2-minute opening statement. Can I call you Josh and Robert? Is that okay?
Totally fine.
Josh will start with the opening statement, and Robert will follow, and then they basically will mention the reasons why they're running, give a little introduction and background, and they will include their personal qualifications at this time. We did a coin toss to see who would go first with the opening statement, and so we will start with that order. We will follow this with questions provided by league members and the audience and our students, and those questions are all screened. If they're similar, they're combined, so we can get to as many topics as possible. Each candidate will be able then to the question to give a 90-second response. The questions will be staggered so that one candidate is not always the first on a new question. At the end of the question and answer portion, each candidate will have the opportunity to give a 3-minute closing statement and to either rebut or reaffirm specific concerns and strengths that they have. Closing statements will be made in reverse order. Our league members who are already introduced, Rochelle and Terry, they will warn you when you have 15 seconds left in your response time, and then also when to stop. And if you don't stop, don't make me come after you. Okay. We will also have several other league members tonight who are working the room. If you have a question, you hear something during the debate, and you have a question, raise your hand. They'll bring a card, write it down, and they'll bring the question to me. I'm going to ask the audience to please hold your applause and any verbal interaction until the end of the debate. Hopefully the candidates will have a few minutes to meet and greet you if you'd like to come up and personally talk to them. Okay, any questions? All right, we're going to get started. So Josh, you have 2 minutes for an opening statement.
Okay. So just want to thank the League of Women Voters first and foremost for putting this forum together, and of course everybody who's in the audience in attendance tonight. My name is Josh Siegel. I'm currently the Chief of Staff to the Lehigh County Controller. I'm getting my master's in public policy at Lehigh University, and I've had the privilege and honor of serving on Allentown City Council for the last 3 years. And in that time on council, I've championed a number of important pieces of legislation. I've made Allentown just the 3rd municipality in the state to offer paid family leave to each and every one of its employees, because I believe that in America and in the Commonwealth, you shouldn't have to choose between your profession and parenthood. And I was proud to make us the 3rd city to do that. I've also fought for a buffer zone to make sure that our Planned Parenthood clinic is safe from harassment and harm, so that women in Allentown seeking reproductive rights and reproductive justice can do so without fear. And I've also, most importantly, been a champion of campaign finance reform, because we know in our city that we have a sordid history with corruption, and that big dollar donors don't deserve to dominate our elections. Every vote and every voice matters. And I was proud to champion legislation that would make sure that we limited campaign contributions here in the city. Now that's what I've done, that's my resume, but I want to tell you who I am. I'm in politics because when I was in the 5th grade, my dad came out to me and my family, and my sister is a trans woman. And that informs my politics, because I know what it's like to have leaders leave your family behind and to use your family as a political pawn for political expediency. I know what it's like when leaders lack the courage to stand up for you. And I take that with me into every fight, whether it's the single mother struggling to pay rent, the family trying to save up money for their kids' education, or seniors trying to age in place with rising property taxes. We need unapologetic champions of working families in Harrisburg, and my political experience and my personal experience says just that. But we also need to make sure that we have leaders we can trust to fight against the rising tide of a MAGA movement that will stop at nothing to overturn our elections, remove a woman's right to choose, and most importantly, destroy and defeat the middle class. So we need unapologetic champions for working families, and we need leaders we can trust in Harrisburg to do the right thing for working families. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Robert?
Thank you, Barbara. And thank you for your service to the Allentown School District. I want to thank the League of Women Voters of Lehigh County for putting this together. I want to thank Josh for coming out. And I want to thank all my family and friends and everyone in the audience for coming out, and our student. Thank you so much. I know, don't be nervous. I'm nervous, but don't you be nervous.
We all are.
I'm Robert E. Smith Jr., and I'm running for the 22nd New District. I'm so happy to be here tonight. Eva and I, my wife, found the American dream in Allentown. we've been married over 38 years. Family means everything to us. We used to come to the Allentown Fair every year, and that's how we learned about Allentown. And we visited friends, and we found a beautiful house on the east side, and we've been there for over 30 years. Our 3 children, Joseph and Jacqueline, went to Deerhoof, as well as Jacqueline's husband, Chris. Joseph's married to Robin, my daughter-in-law, and we have a youngest girl, Heather. They both went to Deerhoof, Joseph and Jacqueline, and Heather went to Central, all in our district, the new 22nd district. So we have 2 charter schools, public school, and Catholic school, so we have them all covered. I got into politics in the 90s when we first got here. I was a committee person, 94 to 98. Mayor Hyde appointed me to city council. I got voted on the Allentown Human Relations Commission. So I was fighting for equal rights for every citizen between 1994 and 1998. We did some tremendous things because there was discrimination in our police department, and we were trying to get more officers, minority officers involved and hired. And what we did was we came up with a bandit system. A bandit system is I'll talk about this more later, already 15 seconds. What it is if somebody gets 100 and everybody's equal, you have to take the person with the 100. Well, in this case, everybody, you can take a person between 90 and 100, and this would help us get more minority candidates. Hopefully I can talk about that more later. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right.
Very fast.
Okay, thank you. All right. Am I on here? Robert, we'll start with you with this first question. If elected to the Pennsylvania legislature, what issues would you prioritize to work on in order to protect the constituents of the 22nd district?
Thank you for the question. We need more police officers in Allentown. We need at least 100 more officers. I've talked to the police chief. The most important thing right now is resources for the police department. Every department in Pennsylvania in the major cities are down on officers, and we need more officers. We need more police SROs in our schools. Right now, our crossing guards right now are in dangerous decline. We can't get crossing guards. So what happens is when you can't get a crossing guard, a police officer has to be put in its place, and that should be taking resources off the street. This has to be stopped. That's my number one issue, and of course, energy. Fuel prices are going up. Food is going up. Fuel prices control the food. Everything goes by energy, and our electricity rates are going up. We have to do everything we can. We are the second largest fuel tax in the United States. We have to lower that. I would have gave it a break till the end of the year. There's some other things I'm going to get into, but also inflation, crime, and education. Being on the school district for 16 years, we have to fully fund the Allentown and the Salisbury School District. I fought for education funding. I worked with Senator Brown and the other legislators, and I brought millions of dollars to the school district, and I will continue to do that as your state rep.
Thank you. Joshua?
Thank you. It's an excellent question. The first thing I'm concerned about, and I've talked about it since day one, is what I call the crisis of affordability. There's no doubt both parties and all candidates are talking about inflation and the rising cost of living. But the way we address that is make sure that we have a government that works for working people. And that means that we have to lower the everyday unavoidable costs that working families are faced with, like childcare, for example. I believe that in the state of Pennsylvania, we should make sure that no family spends more than 7% of their income on childcare, which would return $6,800 a year to working families here in the state. I think we need to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour and index it to inflation, because right now, a worker in New York State makes $5,200 more a year because the legislature in New York raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour, while we're still stuck at $7.25, the lowest in the Northeast. I think we need paid family leave and paid sick leave so that when workers get sick on the job, they can take time off to get better and don't have to choose between putting food on the table and making sure that they're healthy. And that when people have a child and start a family, that they don't have to choose between being good parents and making sure that they have income. So that's first and foremost, is making an economy that revolves around working people, which will reduce people's costs and ultimately address inflation, because that's the inflation families have been fighting for decades and generations. Education is also key. I think we need to have a cradle-to-career education system. That means universal pre-K education, fully funded K through 12, and tuition-free community colleges and public universities so that families don't have to go in debt to make sure that their child gets a quality education. and comprehensive public safety, which means making sure that we address the root causes of crime, the social determinants of crimes, like housing insecurity and poverty. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh.
All right, Josh, this next question goes to you. Article 1, Section 27 of the Pennsylvania Constitution guarantees the rights to clean air, pure water, and preservation of the environment. What actions would you support to secure these rights for Lehigh Valley residents?
There's two things that come to mind. The first is making sure that we restore the capacity of the Department of Environmental Protection here in Pennsylvania so that they have the proper regulatory capacity. A lot of people may not know this, but over the years, previous administrations and the legislature have really failed to fund DEP to the extent that it needs to be funded. And so we now have less regulators than we need to make sure that when people are drilling in Pennsylvania, that they're not polluting the waterways, that fracking wells aren't degrading the environment. First and foremost is accountability and making sure that we can protect citizens from polluters and craven companies that don't care whether or not our kids drink dirty water or our atmosphere is clogged with smog that gives kids asthma and respiratory infections. And the second issue is making sure that when we talk about energy, we have a huge portfolio of energy because we can't just drill. We need to make sure that we're investing in the future of energy, and that means renewable energy. I want Pennsylvania to be the leading manufacturer of solar panels, wind, geothermal, and hydrogen. I want us to be the arsenal of a new industrial revolution that's made up of green jobs, union jobs, and environmentally sustainable jobs. And Pennsylvania can be a leader in making sure that we are a 100% renewable state, which will create tens of thousands of jobs for Pennsylvania working families, clean our air, keep our water safe, and most importantly, make sure that Pennsylvania is a competitor internationally. I want to make sure that we're taking on China and our global competitors. China accounts for 75% of the world's supply chain when it comes to making solar panels. So when we talk about protecting the environment, it means making sure that we are the producers, that people come to Pennsylvania to buy our products, our environmental technology, and then make sure that everybody lives in a state that's clean and safe. Thanks.
Okay, Robert?
Clean air, water, everybody wants that. We just have to do it slowly. What's happening now on the national level is more electric cars. This is a perfect example of what's happening. We are going towards solar too fast. What's happening is we have 100 Tesla cars on the road, and what's happening is Tesla cars are taking up fuel cost taxes. The thing about what we need is more people. Right now, the river, the Lehigh River, is the second largest polluted river in the country. What we need is more people to go after the polluters in the Lehigh River. We're getting people that's causing cancer swimming in the Lehigh River, and that's not good. The legislature, as the DAP, hasn't been funded. But that's because the governor hasn't done enough for it. The governor is the one that's to blame for this, not anyone else. He should be the leader on this. Any kind of defunding of the DMP is the leader of the state, and that's the governor. He should be doing more for the environment in this state. And it's also the local people. What happened with the water? We had runoff water. Another fee. That's what they want to do to protect the water. Charge us more taxes on a runoff fee for all the citizens of Allentown. Will use common sense to deal with air and common sense to use clean water. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. This next question will start with you. What specific measures do you support to secure elections and guarantee easy access to registration and voting for every citizen in Pennsylvania?
I will do everything I can so everybody can have fair elections. For one, in my last election, we need to make sure the elections are decided the day of the elections. Never again should we have a judge race decided months later. First we had Zach Cohen win as judge. Then we had Ritter winning as judge. Then we had Zach finally winning as judge by 5 votes. This should never happen again. Whatever system we have to decide the elections that day. It has to be fair. That's all people want. No one should be disenfranchised. Nobody should be disenfranchised from voting. Once you get your voter ID card, once you come to the state, or once you vote for the first time, that's all you need is the first time to have the voter ID card, and then you're on the rolls. All after that, you're free to vote. The mail-in ballots is causing controversy because when you go to nursing homes, and I work in a nursing home, and I've registered people except for this year because I'm a candidate and I don't want any controversy on that. You could go around and register 30, 40, 50 people in a nursing home, and you could do it for them and just sign their name, and then you can harvest these mail-in ballots and just bring them to the mailbox. That's not right. Anybody who needs an absentee ballot can get an absentee ballot. You just mail it. Anybody who needs a mail-in ballot, I'm not against a husband or a mother getting it, or a father or a grandfather, but nobody should be taking 20 or 30 mail-in ballots through the drop box. That's what causes fraud, or the perception of fraud. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Joshua?
So first, let's just talk some pragmatic ways that we can make sure that the counting of ballots is efficient. First, we should be allowing counties to pre-canvass. That's a huge issue. They should be allowed to count mail-in ballots as they're coming in. As of now, they can only count them at 7 a.m., which is creating the problem where it's taking days to actually get a determined election result. But second of all, it's an antiquated notion that we have to know the election results the night of. There are plenty of states that have vote by mail, California, Utah, Colorado, where election results take time to come in. It's a facet of a modern world where voting is becoming more accessible and simpler. I also think that we need same-day registration. We're one of the few states in the country where people can't come to the polls and register that exact day, which disenfranchises a lot of working-class voters, including voters of color. I think we need to make sure that we also have universal vote by mail. I think it's the most efficient and effective way to run an election, and it's not a red state or blue state issue. Red states like Utah have vote by mail elections that are universally vote by mail. Blue states like Colorado have them. And most importantly in the legislature, I tell you what I'm going to do is push back on this ludicrous notion that there's voter fraud in general. Because what's like trying to put out a fire you started, you don't get credit for it. The reality is that there is one person to blame for this in Pennsylvania. It's Doug Mastriano, who has catapulted the 2020 election lie to the top of the ticket. And we need to push back on that notion. Our elections are secure and fair. There is no voter fraud. It does not exist. And there has never been an election lost to voter fraud. I will make sure that in Pennsylvania, everybody can cast a ballot, that we don't pass restrictive voter ID measures that are deliberately designed to target communities of color. And I'll make sure that everybody can vote without any impediment, because that's the most important thing. Democracy is our civic duty. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Okay, this next question goes to you, Josh. Currently, many school districts are not receiving adequate funding to help students succeed. How would you guarantee equitable funding so all students have the same opportunity for the necessary resources they need to succeed?
Excellent. I think it's an issue that anybody in Allentown understands directly, whether you send your children to private or charter schools or public schools, you understand that our districts are not fully funded. And the first thing we need to do is make sure that all basic education funding goes through the fair funding formula. Because right now, 87% of basic education funding is not going through that formula. So that means our schools are being denied about $4.6 billion a year in additional education funding. Here in the city of Allentown, we're short about $100 million a year. And we've made a little bit of headway with the Level Up funding, which was a great initiative, but we've got a lot of work to do. So the first thing I'm going to do is make sure that we put all basic education funding to the fair funding formula, because that protects districts both urban and rural. Doesn't matter where you are in the state, you're suffering because we don't properly fund public education. I will also make sure that we increase the state share of public education funding. We're 44th in the nation in terms of how much the state spends on public education, which puts local municipalities at a tremendous disadvantage, like Allentown. And I also want to make sure that we reform and have an accountable system of funding our charter schools. I'm not anti-charter by any stretch of the imagination, but there is two systems right now. And the charter school system takes about $200 million a year out of the public education system because we don't fund special education funding with a set formula. And we should have a base rate and uniform rate for cyber charter schools, which take an exorbitant amount of money. So those are the two things I want to make sure we do. Fully fund our public schools by making sure all money goes to the fair funding formula, and make sure that we have a fair, just, and accountable system where all schools are treated equally. That's not extreme, it's not radical, and it doesn't put any student at a disadvantage. I'm not trying to tell you where you should send your kids, but I want to make sure that no matter where you send your kids, there's accountability.
Okay, thank you. Robert?
Well, I've been on the board for 16 years. Well, that was the major issue. Every budget time, how much money are we going to get from the state? And again, it's the state giving us budgets after we already vote on our budget. We don't even know how much money, the district doesn't even know how much money they're getting sometimes in some years. So we had to vote on our school budget before we actually got the money for the state. I would pass legislation that the budget, school districts would not have to pass their budget till the state passes theirs. Too many times the school districts are handcuffed, not knowing how much money they're getting, how much staff can they hire, how many buildings can they repair. This is so wrong on so many levels, and it's happened for years. I've worked with the Senator Brown many years when we needed extra money. He gave us over $10 to $20 million to the school district, and I reached out to him, and he helped the school district many years. But there's no more Senator Brown. And it's going to be a Republican Senate and a Republican House. And you need somebody in there who's going to work with people to get the money back to the district. And I will be that person. What happened also with the charter schools? We have $60 million going to charter schools. Well, there used to be a reimbursement formula that the state changed. If the Allentown School District got 10% of the charter school money reimbursed to them, that would be $6 million. Think what they could do with $6 million. I would return that 10% reimbursement immediately, passing a bill right away. And I can get it done with working over the aisle and working with my fellow Republicans. We can do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. I'm going to follow up with a question from one of your future constituents, and that is, if elected, what would you specifically do to help the Allentown School District?
Well, we're going to need some state oversight, I think, soon. They need to be, the funding, we keep giving more and more money, and the leadership right now is not good. And that's just not the board, it's just superintendent. We're paying the highest superintendent, $240,000. That's the highest Allentown's ever paid a superintendent. And we're overpaying him. Nice guy, nothing against him personally, but he's an Ohio guy, and he doesn't know Allentown. He just doesn't know us. And the leadership, we're losing people, we're losing teachers. I will make sure we stabilize the district by having oversight. I think it's time the Allentown School District has oversight, and I think it needs to be done. They've gone through, since I've left the board 3 years ago, they've gone through 4 superintendents. You had Tom Parker, then you had an acting one, and she left for problems, whatever it was. Then you had Jen Ramos. Now you have Dr. Stanford. 4 different ones. And now there's rumblings, that administrators are leaving. Tom Smith, our facilities director. Business managers leaving. These are 2 key spots in our district. And we cannot keep losing good people. Retention is so important. I know this on my job. People keep turnover. Teachers keep turnover. It's not good for students. It's not good for the teachers. It's not good for the people of the district or the city. We can't just keep having turnover constantly. Thank you.
Thank you. Joshua.
Same question? All right. First, and I alluded to it before, but when I think about how we can make sure the Allentown School District is successful, first and foremost, it's what's best for children. And that's why I believe in a cradle-to-career education system, right? We need to make sure that everybody has access to universal pre-K education, because 90% of a child's brain is developed before they're 5 years old. The most critical years for a child are early education, making sure that they have a supportive, nurturing environment where they learn basic skills that they'll take with them for the rest of their life. It's funding our public schools, K through 12, making sure that our schools get every dollar they deserve. I feel bad for every superintendent that has to step into Allentown, because we put them in an unwinnable situation year after year, asking them to address structural realities and budget constraints beyond their capacity to address. They can't fix the problems. The state made these problems, and until we step up and take our leadership role, the school district's going to continue to struggle, and that's the only way we're going to guarantee that we have consistency in our leadership and consistency from our educators. And then the final thing is making sure that when kids graduate from our education system, that they have access to a multitude of different career opportunities, whether it be blue collar or white collar, whether it be an apprenticeship or a union trade, or making sure that when they go to college, and we know that Allentown has many working class families that are living paycheck to paycheck, let's make sure that college cost is not a constraint, that they can go to the university or community college of their choosing and know that the state is making that investment in them. Imagine the ability to go to a community college or a public university here without any fear about cost of tuition. We're investing in the future, because I believe that the next CEO, the next entrepreneur, the next small business owner, the next doctor, we could build them here in Allentown by investing in them. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Josh, this next question will start with you. PA ranks 24th out of 50 states for legal protection of the LGBTQ community and public support of LGBTQ rights. Additional data shows the situation for the LGBTQ community is worse in the Lehigh Valley than statewide. What's your view of additional legislation needed to guarantee the rights of those in the LGBTQ community?
Is it me first?
Yeah, Josh, you're starting.
Okay, all right. First and foremost, let me just say that when I think about the LGBTQ community, I'm not just talking about some distant constituent. For me, as I've told you, it's family. And for me, it's like fighting for my father or for my sister. And the most important thing that we can do in Pennsylvania is make sure that we pass the Pennsylvania Fairness Act, which would codify protections for sexual orientation, gender identity, into the Human Relations Commission, because that's the biggest issue right now, is if you come out on Tuesday as a trans woman, you can be fired on Wednesday by your employer, and there is no consequence to that. And that's not freedom, that's not fair, and that's not justice. And so that's the first thing I'll do on day one, is fight for the Pennsylvania Fairness Act. That's the most important thing we can do. So we send a strong message to employers and individuals that hate has no place in Pennsylvania. We will not tolerate it. Because if we've seen one thing about hate, it's bad in every respect, because companies don't want to come to states that are hateful places. People don't want to bring their businesses to places that don't love and cherish every member of the community. I want to make sure that in Pennsylvania, every individual knows that no matter who you love, or what you look like, or who you identify as, you matter, you're safe, you're included, and you'll be valued. And the Pennsylvania Fairness Act is the best way to do that.
Thank you, Josh. Robert?
Thank you. I would be for the Fairness Act too. I've been fighting for civil rights, equal rights for 40 years, from the streets of New York City where I was born, Greenwich Village in the late 70s, and movie crews, and some of the old timers may see this movie about homophobia in the NYC department when serial killers were killing homosexuals. In 94 to 98, we had pushed for sexual orientation being added to the city charter. And also, I nominated Liz Bradbury, who's an outstanding human being, for the Human Relations Award. I was the first Republican to walk in the Pride Fest parade when there was parades. I was a Republican who was the only candidate that had a table recently at Pride Fest. I have family members and friends that are gay and lesbian too, and I will always fight for their rights. Equal employment, adoption, health care. There's no reasons for any of them to have unequal rights, and I will always fight for equal rights and civil rights for all people equally and representatively. But what I will not do is support a man identifying as a woman who wants to play women's sports in college and in pro, that will take a spot of one of my 4 granddaughters who plays sports. When you create a right like that, and it takes away from a woman's right, that is where I draw the line. I will not create a right to take away from women's rights in Title IX. Now, Martina Navratilova, Caitlyn Jenner, they've all spoken out against this. And that is where I draw the line. Otherwise, I treat people equally. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Robert. This next question, we'll start with you. I know you've kind of touched this, both of you, in some of your opening statements. Many legislators from both parties have put forth resolutions for increasing the minimum wage from $7.25, which has not been increased in 10 years. What would your plan be for dealing with the present minimum wage?
Well, we should probably tie it to every time a legislator raises their salary. That's what we should have been doing, because they have automatic raises right now. The minimum wage should be going up gradually. You can't just go to the $15 right away, because think about it. Minors, there should be a caveat. I'm all for 15. I would never vote against 15. But at the same time, we have minors that work, and they're gonna, like, the big stores, of course, can handle 15. But the Taco Bell or the minors, they need to work too. And even the city doesn't pay 15. They pay $13 or $14 an hour. Most companies are not even paying that. They're paying $15. But I don't want to disenfranchise people. Look at the farmer's market. Here's a perfect example. Nobody, we can't, that place is open 3 days a week. Can you imagine if you gave everybody $15? The cost of food would go up. They'd be either go out of business, people wouldn't pay it. You can't hurt businesses and small businesses and markets like that. They only work 3 days a week, and most of the people work there is a second job for them, and it's $10 an hour, and that works beautifully. You don't want the farmer's market to end. You can't just say, it's a great tagline, let's raise the minimum wage. Of course we should raise it gradually, but you don't want to hurt small businesses at the same time. Like anything, you just can't go A to Z. You got to go up slowly and gradually. And like I said, we can raise it every year till we get to 15 and keep it tied to legislators' increases. And I think you will never have a problem again with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Joshua?
Well, look, when it comes to minimum wage, I think, frankly, Pennsylvania families can't afford to wait. Okay, and the worst thing for businesses, the worst thing for our economy is denying people a living wage. Because we're the job creators. I want people in this room to understand that everyone in this room is a job creator. It's not corporate CEOs on the 36th floor. It's not hedge fund managers on Wall Street. It's not stockbrokers. The people that work on factory floors, who wait your tables, direct care professionals that take care of our elderly, our social workers, we're the job creators. They're the job creators. And when we have more money in our pockets, we don't buy stocks and dividends. We don't invest in stupid things. We put it into the economy. We go out and we make sure that our kids have clothes for school. We patronize a local restaurant. We support our local small business. If we were to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour in Pennsylvania, there would be $5.3 billion a year put back into the Pennsylvania economy every year. That's money for small businesses. That's job creation for small businesses. The worst thing we could do for our small businesses is keep regular everyday people in poverty when you have no extra income at the end of the day to spend. And the other thing about the minimum wage, the myth and misconception, is that it's teenagers. It's not. 86% of people who work a minimum wage job are over the age of 20. 3 in 5 are women. 1 in 3 has a child under the age of 18 in the home. These are everyday working class citizens. And by the way, I don't think it matters what your age is. If you're doing the work and you're putting in the time, you're worth the money. It's not a question of whether or not you're a teenager or an adult. If you're doing the job, if you're sweating in a kitchen, if you're working your butt off, you're worth the $15 an hour. And there's 1.46 million people who need the $15 an hour right now.
Thank you, Joshua. Okay, I'm going to ask both of you one more question, and then I'm going to call our student up to ask you a few questions.
Woohoo!
So this next question goes to Joshua. As states around us have legalized the use of recreational marijuana, do you see the need for any changes to be made to the laws in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, excellent question. 2 things. I am 100% in favor of recreational marijuana. I believe that our former Auditor General, Eugene DePasquale, had put forth a study where he found that the state could make over about $1 billion in taxable revenue if we legalize marijuana. Now think about what the state could do with $1 billion. We could do pot for potholes. We could literally fix our busted roads and broken streets by taxing people that smoke a little weed. I think that's a nice little tagline or solution. We could also perhaps use the revenue we gain from legal weed to address all of the racial disparities that we have in marijuana sentencing laws. How about let's invest some of the money from marijuana proceeds into making sure that our economy is racially just. At the end of the day, we need to legalize recreational marijuana, but we also have to atone for a war on drugs that has been an abject failure in America. Because when you criminalize a behavior, you don't stop it, you just drive it underground. And marijuana is a harmless drug, let's be real. It's safer than alcohol. It doesn't have any harmful side effects. There's no ramifications. So we should also expunge the criminal records of anybody who's ever been incarcerated for possession of marijuana. That's a reasonable and just thing to do because we have unduly harmed many people by putting them in jail, especially the racial disparity, because African Americans are 3 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana usage, even though they use it at the same rate as whites. So let's make our economy racially just. Let's raise some revenue in the meantime. Let's invest it back into the state in a sensible and reasonable way. And let's atone for our past mistakes by addressing the legacy of the war on drugs, which simply has not worked. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert?
Well, we do have a serious drug problem in this country, and it's fentanyl coming over the southern border, and we need to deal with that. But at the same time, marijuana is not a drug that I would penalize. I just think we have to be careful. I have grandchildren, and I'm not against, first of all, I'm for the medical marijuana, and I'm not against marijuana being legalized, but like alcohol, you don't want to drive with it too much, and you don't want to sit in a park with your grandchildren and smell weed, and you have to explain to your grandchildren that it's a skunk smell. So I think we got to be careful how we do this. It's got to be slowly done, and it's got to be under restrictions. I don't have any problem with someone in their house smoking marijuana. That's your house and your domain. That's no problem. But when you're in public, you don't want to see drunkenness in public when people overdrink, and you don't want people high in public, like on their vehicles and causing accidents. This has got to be a common sense approach. Of course, it's always the money grab. Let's grab as much money we can. Let's do this. Let's sell more drugs. Let's do marijuana. That's always the easy way. Follow the money. Let's get more money. But you got to do it slowly. You got to do things with common sense. And having children and grandchildren that can be affected by this, and our community. Think about our community. I just think that we got to take it slow, legislate it properly, and with common sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Liliana, do you want to come up? I'm here with you, girl. We're going to take a second to...
Hi, my name is Ilianis. I am a sophomore at Building 21 in Allentown. I'm a 15-year-old girl raised by a Hispanic single mother who has fought all her life to get me and my brother a stable way of living. Through her, I've come to learn that housing and rent and bills aren't always fair or affordable. In an article published by the Morning Call, the COC established that the Lehigh County had at least 2,250 people experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness in 2019, with roughly 2/3 living in Allentown. and I believe the numbers have been increasing since then. As a person who has experienced homelessness due to the pass of Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, I want to ask you how you are going to tackle the housing crisis that we are living in right now to prevent homelessness, and what long-term projects are you bringing to the table that will assist the homeless? Smith?
Thank you for the question, and thank you that you're here tonight. We definitely have a homeless problem. Walking in tonight broke my heart. I saw homeless people on the front of the steps here, and they were not doing enough about it. I remember on city council, we took walks in Tent City, and it's tragic, and we're not doing enough about it, and we all have to do enough about it. But it's always new shelters or this and that, and it's just we're not doing enough. We have a men's shelter, but then we have the 6th Street shelter. But then the men can only go there, not women and children, and it's like a catch-22. And then you have families. We have, when I was on council, when on school board, 600 students were homeless. And people don't understand what homeless is. It just doesn't mean in the street. It means they have no place to go. So they go to a hotel, or they go to a foster home. And this is tragic. And we're not doing enough about it as a community. And I will do everything. We have the Allentown State property coming up, which I'll talk about later. I don't know what we can do up there, but we should have affordable housing. But also, the Lehigh Parkways have over 100 buildings that are going to be prepared. But I will do everything I can. My mom was a single mom. I was a latchkey kid. She was a waitress, and she worked hard. And I remember how hard it was. Me and my sister would be home for school while waiting for my mom to come home. And I admire you for being a mom and going to school. That's so wonderful. And every person, like even the Allen program we took so much criticism at Allen because our students that are pregnant got to go to school. And I think that's an excellent program, and I always was for it. And I will support students who are pregnant or have children to go to school and go to college and better themselves. Being a father and a grandfather, this means so much to me. Thank you.
You're doing a great job, so thanks for asking your questions. The issue of homelessness and housing affordability is one of my top concerns. And I think the first thing we have to do really is preventing homelessness, right? I think if we can stop somebody from becoming homeless in the first place, that's a great win for us as a society and as a city. And one of the things I want to do at the state level is fund a right to counsel program. So right now, here's something you could get involved with at a young age and help advocate for. Roughly 90% of people that go through eviction proceedings here in Lehigh County don't have any access to legal representation. So that means you could be an everyday working citizen, no real knowledge of the legal system. You could be in danger of being evicted, and you have to do that without an attorney standing by your side. And we know that when you don't have that legal representation, you're much more likely to lose that case, you're much more likely to be evicted, you're much more likely to be thrown out in the street. And once you're evicted, it's very hard to find another apartment because that record follows you everywhere. So I want to invest in prevention. And the second thing I want to do is make sure that we build more housing because frankly, we just aren't building enough units to keep up with the demand. And that's what's driving costs through the roof. And I think we need an all of the above approach. We need to make it easier for the private sector to build by cutting red tape and encouraging walkable communities. But I also think we need to build social housing or public housing where we create mixed income opportunities where people that are lawyers live next to minimum wage workers in the same apartment. Right now, what we can't do is create economic segregation. We can't kind of push people away. We can't keep communities of concentrated poverty away from communities with concentrated wealth. We need everyone to live together, make sure that they live in walkable communities with good access to jobs. So I want to make sure that we prevent homelessness and evictions and make sure that people can stay where they live. And I want to make sure that we build more affordable housing where people don't have to spend $2,700, $3,000 a month.
Thank you. The next question is by Ismael Cruz. He's a senior at 21. And he said, gun violence has become an issue where young people are especially connected with the actions taken or not taken by their representatives. Here in Allentown, it is unusual for a student to go through 4 years of high school without being touched by gun violence. It's only October 10th, and already our own school district hasn't been able to protect us from this issue. So today, I ask you, if elected, what are your plans to take specific action to protect our students from the gun violence in our community? Mr. Albert?
Sorry.
It's okay. Obviously, an excellent question, and as we all know, we recently lost Trayshawn Tracy to gun violence, and we know that it's no stranger here to our community. And I think the first thing that we need to do, and I'm organizing it on Allentown City Council right now, is have more gun buybacks. We need to make sure that we get illegal or illicit firearms off the street, or for that matter, legal guns that people simply don't want anymore and don't care about. Because the reality is every illegal gun was once legal. and somehow it filtered down into the system. So a gun buyback would make our community safer and make sure that there were less firearms in the community. And that will not only keep our community safer from gun violence as a result of homicides, but also save people from suicides, because 2/3 of all gun deaths in this country are people taking a gun and putting it to their own head. And that's tragic, and we could prevent that. But beyond that, I want to make sure that we're getting dangerous guns off the street. I'm a big believer, I'm not against the Second Amendment, but I'm a big believer that weapons of war and assault weapons have no business in our community. And as we know, the AR-15 is the weapon of choice for mass shooters. And if we want to keep our kids safe, we need to get weapons and machines of war that were designed to kill and maim out of the hands of every individual. You can defend yourself with a shotgun and a pistol, I'm not against that, but no one needs a weapon of war. And I think we've seen the consequences of that in Uvalde and communities across the country, that when we let madmen have weapons of war, innocent children are slaughtered. And I also want to make sure that we invest in our youth. And one of the things I want to do in Harrisburg is fund a statewide youth service corps. I want to make sure that we give at-risk youth part-time, year-round employment, taking care of their community, giving them a sense of belonging and creating a stable source of purpose. So I want to make sure that everyone between the ages of 14 and 24 can get access to a year-round employment where they can make sure that they have a sense of belonging and income and they can take care of their community.
Gun violence is tragic. What happened the other day. Also, the Allen had a gun, and the reason that person had a gun was for his own safety, and that's the problem. Kids don't feel safe going to schools, and that's leadership. It's a leadership issue. And it's not just always a gun issue. I'm for the Second Amendment, and I'm for people being legal guns. Illegal guns should be off the street. No young person needs an AR-15, but I'm not for banning guns either. But we need to do more safety in the school systems. I don't care if it takes metal detectors at Allen. We got to make sure guns are not going in, knives, weapons. There's a gang issue going on there. People never want to talk about it because it will change the perception. We have to have a task force to attack the gang issues in Allen and all over the city. And the district attorney has to get involved, and the police chief, and the mayor, and they have to take this more serious. We have to attack the crime. It's not always the gun. There's knives that are people attacking. You're going to ban knives. We had a 25-year-old teacher get hit by a car. These tragic things happen in all different areas, and we have to address the issues. We should have raised the speed limit the other day higher than that. God, 5 miles an hour because someone got killed. It's ridiculous the way they're speeding around here. But people are using cars as aggressive weapons as well. But we need to make sure the point here is students need to feel safe, or they're not going to be able to go to school and learn. If they're afraid for their getting beat up or getting shot or getting killed, how are they supposed to learn? We have to make sure there's safety in the schools. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. The next question was written by Abby Turdos. She's also a senior at Building 21, and her question is, like all high school students, Abby was born into a country where access and the right for an abortion was guaranteed to society. After the August decision and the reproductive health care services have been impacted, other states have rushed down laws on this issue, whilst Pennsylvania hasn't yet. And so my question is, if elected, how will you use your position to work with this problem?
It's a real personal issue, abortion. I'm Catholic and I'm pro-life. My wife and I go to church all the time, but I would never legislate my beliefs to another human being ever. Right now it's 24 weeks, and I think that is a perfect place with the Lehigh Valley. It's a common sense 24 weeks. And the reason I think that is the longer a woman holds on to the baby, I think she'll have it. But at the same time, it gives a woman 6 months choice to decide if she wants to have the baby or not. I think it works. There's less abortions this year than there were last year. That's because of birth control. That's because of sex education. And I think 24 weeks is a stable thing for our city and for our state. I know it's going around the country, but in Pennsylvania and in Allentown and the Lehigh Valley and my 22nd district, I go door to door and I hear all different views on this subject because it's a personal subject. And we need limited I just want to be safe for the mother and the baby for 24 weeks. And I think it's so important that they take time to make this decision. At the same time, a woman's choice, it is her body, and up to 24 weeks, she should do what she wants. And that is, I think that's stable. I would not legislate to change the law at all. And that is a Scout's honor promise.
Thank you. And I think it's probably the most consequential election for access to abortion rights, right? The Dobbs decision showed us that the future of abortion is going to be decided here in the states. And we have to make sure that up and down the ballot, we are electing unapologetic champions that are pro-choice and unapologetically pro-choice. And I'm proud to be pro-choice. I'm endorsed by both Planned Parenthood and Vote Pro-Choice, two leading national organizations that support making sure that abortion remains legal here in the United States and specifically in Pennsylvania. And so I will 100% resist any effort by the Pennsylvania legislature to roll back abortion rights, because the gubernatorial nominee, Doug Mastriano, if he wins, wants to ban abortion in all instances, rape, incest, and life of the mother. And that's the kind of movement that's trying to take over the states right now. And we need leaders here in Pennsylvania that we can trust. And I'm the only candidate that's got the endorsement from Planned Parenthood and Vote Pro-Choice. I'm the candidate you can trust to make sure that abortion rights will not be under siege, and that I will fight back tooth and nail against any effort to overturn them. Because it's not just going to be a trade-up vote. There's a heartbeat bill that would ban abortion at 6 weeks, but they're also going to try and pass a constitutional amendment next election cycle that would basically put it to a vote. And they're going to try to do it in a municipal year when there's low turnout. So they're going to literally try to ban abortion behind our backs by playing off low turnout elections. And the other thing we need to make sure is that abortions are rare. Like, we need to make sure that contraception and IUDs are widely available and easy to get. One of the best things the state could do is subsidize IUDs. Colorado did it, for example, made IUDs that last 5 years or longer, low cost and affordable. They cut their teenage pregnancy rate by 50%, and they reduced abortions by 50%. So we invest in sensible family planning. We make sure that it's not a choice many people have to make. But for the people that need to make that choice, it needs to be there.
Thank you.
You did a great job. I know, good job. You really were a wonderful role model for your school. Yeah, good job.
I think we see a moderator in the next 15
I
minutes.
do. I said she's going to take over my job. Okay, let me get back on track. Where are we here?
Right at the cue cards.
Okay, so, Josh, this next question goes to you.
Great.
The executive director of the Lehigh Valley chapter of the National Alliance of Mental Illness states that our mental health system is in crisis. How would you work toward improving
Services to Lehigh Valley residents. Today is World Mental Health Day, so it's an appropriate question. How would you work in improving services to Lehigh Valley residents as far as mental health services?
One, I want to make sure that the state adequately invests sufficient resources. I want to make sure that we have more direct care professionals, right? A lot of individuals that have mental health disabilities live at home with their caretakers, which are often family and parents. But a lot of those caretakers are elderly, and as they get older, it's harder and harder for them to take care of their family members. And we have a huge crisis of care workers in this country right now and here in Pennsylvania because we don't pay our direct care professionals a living wage. And many of them are leaving that industry. And so it's leaving a lot of families that are elderly without the ability to actually properly care for their family. And so until we make sure that those care workers get the wages they deserve and actually get the respect they deserve, it's going to be very difficult to care for workers. It's going to be very difficult to care for individuals with mental health. I also think that, like we just talked about, making our community and society safer, right? Paid sick leave and paid family leave, right? If you are working and you get ill and you need time off to see a therapist or get better, we don't support you as a society. You have to choose between what's right for you and also paying the bills. And then, of course, making access to health care more affordable. I'm a big believer that the state of Pennsylvania should at the very least offer a low-cost public health care option so that you can buy state health care and you can get it at a reduced rate so that you can see the doctors that you need to see, that you can get the treatment you need, whether that be medication or therapy. So the most important thing we can do is make access to health care affordable to everybody, make sure that we support the workers who support us, and at the end of the day, make sure that everybody's treated with dignity and respect. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert?
Well, this is amazing. I work in the healthcare field, and I am so upset that the Allentown State Hospital was torn down. That was a pretty bad decision by Republicans and Democrats, and that's one of the reasons why we have a mental health problem in this state, because all the people are walking around the streets from the hospital being torn down. I work every day with brain injury people. It is so taxing on the family, the brothers, the sisters, older people who are taking care of brain injury. These are people that can't feed themselves. These are people that have brain injuries, that can't have a job. All they're doing is existing. And you have to make some care for them. It takes empathy. It takes time. I worked this weekend with people, and we took them out. The highlight of their day was going out shopping, walking around Walmart. This was the highlight of their day. And we have to do more for these people. There's definitely a healthcare. I work for Nuvite Wellness and Recovery, and we're constantly hiring people, constantly. and it's just so much stress and pressure on these healthcare first line. I get a lot of stress working with these people, but we have to care for our people. We have to care for mental health. We have to care for our seniors. These are people that the community, when you put them in group homes, nobody wants them near their home. This is a major issue. We don't have a hospital to put them in, so they come to group homes like myself. But we all have to care, and I will legislate funds for these groups, but also we need to reach out to the families and help people that want to stay home and give them help. Like you have nurses come into the house, we need to come into the house for these people with mental illness as well. They all need to be diagnosed by a doctor and given medicine. Once they're diagnosed by a doctor and get on medication, most of them can return.
Thank you. Okay, Robert, this next question goes to you. Many people in Allentown are dependent on public transportation to get to work. What specific improvements to public transportation are needed in the Lehigh Valley, and how will you support their implementation?
Well, we need the rail service right away. 10 years from now, when we build more houses on the east side, look at 22. If you're not driving 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning, 4th Street, Hanover is packed. If we don't do something fast, it's going to be like a parking lot. We need rail service from New York to Allentown, Allentown to Philly. I think this is major. Dave Bausch and I talked about this, former county executive, and time has come to bring rail service to the Lehigh Valley. Also, the cars, the situation with cars. We have to do more carpooling. I think it's time. We save on emissions that way. Carpooling could be on 22. It's going to come. Unless we invest in a 3rd lane, which is going to cost us millions of dollars, and just like how it took millions of dollars to build a bridge, it's going to take us millions of dollars and about 20 years to do a 3rd lane on 22. So we're going to have to start carpooling. This is a major issue because there's more people coming in the valley. It's one of the greatest places to live, but how you get around? It's constant traffic. I don't know if everyone's noticed it. Constantly traffic everywhere, and we have to do something about it. And I think the rail and the bus service for the kids being free I was pushing for that for years, and it finally happened. I think more people should be incentivized to take mass transit. We should increase the bus times as well. Once an hour is not enough. They should be going every 20 minutes. Thank you.
Yep. So I think the best way to categorize this is short-term, long-term. Now, in the long run, of course, the regional rail line is the best place to go. And by regional, I mean just around the Lehigh Valley. The idea that you can take a short rail from Allentown to Bethlehem to Easton and then out to the suburbs. That's about economic connectivity, and that's about making sure that if you live in the city, you can access a job anywhere else in the valley. And that's a long-term aspiration. That's going to take a tremendous amount of planning and financing. But the state's going to be a huge partner in making that happen because it's going to cost tens of millions of dollars, probably billions. And the state's going to have to be a partner in making sure that it guarantees some of those bonds and some of those finances. But the more immediate thing we can do is make sure that Atlanta is reliable and accessible to everybody. And I can tell you from a person that works at the county, one of the key things that our economic development partners talk about is that the worse public transit is, the harder it is to attract new jobs to your region and new growth, because it's harder for people to get from urban cores out to where the jobs are. And so if we want our region to keep growing, we need to make sure that Atlanta is reliable. I think we need to aspire to the idea of a 15-minute bus ride everywhere. The Atlanta buses need to be running around the clock. Because it is impractical that it takes sometimes an hour and a half, 2 hours to get to where you need to be. The Atlanta routes aren't always practical, they're not always efficient, they drop you off far away from where you need to work, and that's not good public transit. And if we want people to take public transit, including, and not just people that want to take it for jobs, but recreationally to get from where they want to go to have a night, we need to make sure that public transit is reliable, simple, and easy. And in the long run, yes, we need rail between here and New York and Philly. I'd like to explore the idea of maybe a SEPTA line from here to Philadelphia. That's within the state with our own control. The rail line to New York is perhaps the biggest dream the Valley's ever had, and I think everybody in this room would agree it would be advantageous. But that's going to take a lot of planning. We've got to focus on the short-term gains, like making Atlanta available to everybody.
Josh, this next question goes to you. Problems are solved and solutions arrived at when politicians come to the middle and compromise. How would you work across the aisle in the state legislature to achieve consensus and make progress for Pennsylvanians?
Well, I want to be clear when we talk about things like bipartisanship and unity, because those matter. But we also need to make sure that we send leaders to Harrisburg that will never compromise on their values. Because bipartisanship at the expense of what you believe or what you care about is not bipartisanship, it's concession of your most integral core. But that being said, I will work with anyone who wants to advance the interest of Allentown residents. I'll work with anybody that wants to make sure workers have more money in their pockets, that they have access to better benefits and better wages, and that they have access to better housing. And I think that there's a lot of consensus to be built. Everybody around the state understands we have an affordability issue. Whether you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, doesn't matter, rural or urban, people know it's expensive to live. And it's not just an impediment to individual well-being, it's an impediment to the state. The more expensive housing gets, the harder it is for us to develop as a region, the harder it is for people to come here, businesses to come here. I think there's plenty of consensus to be had, but it's a matter of seeking out those win-win solutions. Something I talked about before, like the Youth Service Corps. Who could be against the idea of making sure that our most at-risk youth get access to year-round employment that keeps them out of harm's way, keeps them out of danger, and gives them a sense of purpose? Who amongst us could be against that? I want to look for those situations where there's broad consensus, where we can make meaningful and tactical investments in people's well-being and work to make that a reality. But I also want to be clear that I will never compromise on my values, because I'm not going to compromise on voting rights, and I'm not going to work with people that want to see the election overturned because they don't simply like the results. All right, bipartisanship matters, but not when it comes at the expense of what's right. And so we most importantly need to send that we need principled leaders in Harrisburg that understand what needs to be done.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
I was on a school board for 16 years. The last 5 years, I was the only Republican. I had to reach across the aisle. I was never going to get anything done. First of all, the last year on the school board, we had a 3.5% tax increase. That's when we used to have it in the threes. Right now, it was 5.3 this year. Unbelievable. One of the highest tax increases in the last 10 years. They've raised taxes the last 3 years I've been off the board. But it was 8 board members on the board that day. The tax increase was 3.5. It was 4.4. I finally said, all right, I can't get it to 0. Sometimes you can't get everything you want. So I didn't go on my convictions. I was looking for the people. 3.5 or 1.75. I couldn't get it to 0. I got the Democrats on the board to compromise, and we lowered it to 1.75. And that was a victory, not for me, not for the board, but for the people. That's how you get things done. You reach across the aisle and you compromise. And you don't yell at your fellow board members when they don't agree with you. You don't yell at the people that disagree with you. You walk across the aisle and you get things done. As a city councilman, I was one of the few Republicans on the board. I was the swing voter on fluoride. I was the swing voter on landlord licensing. I know how to work with people. It's too divisive politics. It's time to work together. We don't need gridlock like on the national level. We need to get things done. And I'm the best candidate to get things done. I don't call names to either governor candidate. I will work with either governor candidate that wins. And I think that's important. I will work with anyone to get the job done and bring resources back to this 22nd district.
Thank you. Okay, Robert, of the 700,000 residents living in Lehigh and Northampton County, approximately 50,000 are in need of drug rehabilitation. What additional resources do you feel are needed to combat the opioid addiction crisis?
First, addiction is horrible. We have like one Benadryl clinic here in the valley, and that is it. I deal with drug addiction residents every day, and what's happening is they put them on another drug, and then they get addicted to the other drug, and they sleep all the time. What we need is to have more help for people in these addiction, because we see them walking around. Fentanyl is the #1 problem right now. 100 people every day are getting killed, and this country's not doing enough about it. All of us are not doing enough about it. It's killing kids, it's killing adults. I just heard from a friend of mine, his boss was killed, 32 years old. He popped the wrong pill, and it was fentanyl, and he died. This is tragic what's happening, and we're not doing enough about it, and we have to fight to get this drugs off the street, and it's coming through the southern border. We have to stop these drugs from coming in. As in a country, as a state legislator, we have to do more. And I think we need a drug task force in the district, from the district attorney's office, to make sure it's not in the schools. I mean, I remember when I was on the school board, they were putting cocaine in chapstick. That's how they were getting it in the schools. I mean, I don't even know how they could afford cocaine. But these are the things that are happening. Drug dealers don't care. We have to do more to protect our students. We have to do more to protect the epidemic in this country. And it's fentanyl right now. That's the #1 issue.
Okay, Thank you. Joshua?
Well, first, what I want to make sure, you want to talk about pill pushers in this country, look no further than the pharmaceutical companies, because they're the ones that started this opioid epidemic. They're the ones that peddled cheap pills for decades that got our citizens addicted. And I want to make sure that our state attorney's general office has the constant resources they need to go after pill pushing companies that infected and got our citizens addicted. And Attorney General Shapiro has been very successful at that. We've gotten a number of opioid settlements, and I want to make sure he can continue that work. Well, not he. The next Attorney General can continue that work. He'll continue that work as governor. I want to make sure that first and foremost that we have the resources and that the treatment centers that exist have the ability to treat individuals that are in crisis. And another thing that I'm a big believer in is making sure that we have supervised injection sites, because we need to make sure that people that are addicted are treated with dignity and humanity, and that we supervise their recovery. As I've said before, the war on drugs has been a horrendous failure. When you criminalize things, when you incarcerate people, you make it worse. Look at what the war on drugs has done in the last 50 years. The evidence speaks for itself. It hasn't done anything to reduce the use of drugs. It hasn't done anything to make our society safer. What we need to do is make sure that we treat addiction like what it is. Not a criminalization issue, it's a public health issue. And that means making sure that people get the resources they need to get off the drugs that they're addicted to. And that means supervised injection site, it means making sure they have access to affordable health care, and it means making sure that we go after the pill-pushing corporations that think it's okay to get workers addicted to drugs when they get injured. So those are the three things I would focus on.
Thank you. Okay, an energy question. Joshua, during this past year, we saw a great deal of volatility in gasoline prices for people fueling their cars. People with electric vehicles were immune from this volatility. Would you support a gradual transition to electric vehicles over the coming years?
Before we talk about energy here in Pennsylvania, there's one thing that I want to talk about, because there's been a lot of frustration with energy prices domestically, and I just want to make sure people understand the way that energy works, because there's been a lot of blame directed at individual leaders in the state. Energy is a global commodity, right? Anytime there's instability in the world, energy prices go up. So the most important thing that we can do is make sure that we have a strong state supply of energy, that people do have electric vehicles. But most importantly, what I want people to understand is that 50% of the inflation that we experienced this last year was the direct result of price gouging, corporate price gouging. That's a real statistic from the Pennsylvania Working Study, from the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center. Half of the inflation we paid was the result of companies price gouging. And so the more energy that we can produce here in Pennsylvania that's renewable, that's clean, and that's Pennsylvania made, is going to be great for our economy and our workers. And that means making sure that we complement the federal efforts to make sure that more people can buy electric vehicles, because that'll drive down the cost of EVs. As more and more people buy them, there'll be a market for it. Which means we'll be less reliant on foreign oil. We'll be less reliant on countries like Russia and Saudi Arabia. We'll take on the Chinese, who are the ones that are currently making most of the solar panels in the world. And I'm also a big believer in clean hydrogen. That's a really untapped fuel source that we could make here in Pennsylvania, that we could export not just to the world, but across the United States. And that's a clean energy revolution that's going to create tens of thousands of union jobs for workers across the state, urban, rural, potentially here for people in Allentown. It's going to make sure that we no longer have to deal with foreign adversaries that use oil as a cudgel to try to get what they want. We'll no longer have to bow before OPEC. And most importantly, it's going to make sure that we keep our state clean for the future of our children. Thank you.
Robert?
Gee, I thought it was Putin's fault why we have this big energy. Thank you for the information. Energy, we have the more resources in Pennsylvania that we won't need to worry about energy for years to come. And we should be drilling more, we should be fracking. And at the same time, I am for solar. But at the same time, you got to be careful. You put your solar on the house, which I'm all for. But at night, the solar goes down, and you still have to have a generator there, and you still need electricity. So let's not remember this. We have to have a common sense again. Keep the fossil fuels going, but at the same time, go electric cars. I like a little bit of both. I like a little bit of everything. Let's keep everything on the table. Fossil fuels are important till we get there. Who can afford a $60,000 car right now? And then the battery in the car is $15,000 to replace. Let's be serious now. Who can afford that every day? We have 1,000 Teslas. I see them driving around. How about the fuel price, the fuel tax now? That's second highest. Now they keep raising it because how are they going to get back that money? Now they're thinking about hiring the registration fee for Teslas. Now, is that fair? That's another fee. But that's one way of doing it. So we got to be careful when we talk about going this way or going that way. We can do it, but we have to do it gradually. And on the energy, it's bad policy from the president. That is just bad energy prices. And you forgot Venezuela and Saudi Arabia. We shouldn't be having to go and beg for oil to these countries. Thank you.
Thank you. We're running overtime, so I'm going to ask one more question, and then we'll go to closing statements. And then if we have some time left, if you can stay, if you have any questions yet you'd like to ask the candidates personally, you're welcome to stay. All right, last question deals with our local environment. The Lehigh River watershed is one of the most polluted in the country. It ranked 13th in toxicity-weighted releases and 30th in cancer-causing chemicals. What role does the state government have in cleaning up or preventing further pollution to Lehigh River?
Yes, Robert.
Purification, we need to purify the water with purification filter systems. We need more people watching out for polluters. We don't have enough people. I keep hearing this. We don't have the manpower. It's always about manpower. But we have to protect the water. We have people swimming in the Lehigh and taking their boats in the Lehigh Valley. We want to expand over the Lehigh Valley with the center down on Front Street. We're expanding out there, and we're going to be on the water there. We need to do more to purify our water. And also, we need to watch out for polluters. And the state needs to come in here and regulate this. We have so much regulation, but we don't have enough regulation for water. Is that ridiculous or what? Oh my God, we have so much permits and so much regulation on the state level. Let's have some regulation for our water. Thank you.
Okay. Joshua?
So first and foremost, I think we both agree on this one. We need more people at the Department of Environmental Protection, making sure that we regulate bad actors that pollute our water, that clog our air. But beyond that, and it was alluded to earlier, we need to support local communities in being responsible partners. In Allentown, we do have a stormwater fee, and it's because the state often passes on unfunded mandates to states, or to cities and municipalities. And I'm a big believer that local communities need to do their part to make sure that they're environmentally friendly. One of the things we do with our stormwater fee is try to reduce the number of impermeable surface, right? We want to make sure that when it rains here in the Lehigh Valley, that stormwater runoff doesn't run into the streams. So think about it, every time you drive your car and you produce exhaust or you dump toxins on the street and it rains, all that water washes into our storm system. And a lot of that winds up overflowing into our waters, streams, and our estuaries, which clogs up and pollutes our rivers. So as a state, I want to make sure that we don't pass unfunded mandates onto our municipalities, which does hurt our local taxpayers, because all a city can do, and I can tell you as a council person, is comply. We have no choice. But we need to be a good partner in making sure that municipalities, counties have the resources to make sure that they're weatherizing their homes, to make sure that they're energy efficient, making sure that when we build warehouses, there are solar panels on the roof so that we can be much more environmentally efficient, making sure that we're more efficient in managing our truck traffic so that they're not idling on the roads for so long and putting carcinogens in the atmosphere. And we need to make sure that at the end of the day, we're switching to renewable energy, because until we do that, we're not going to get these harmful chemicals out of the environment. We're not going to get dirty fuel and dirty energy out of the air and out of the streams. And that's the only thing we can do in the long run.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's time for closing statements. So, Mr. Smith, we will start with you. You have 3 minutes for your closing statement.
Thank you. Thank you again for this wonderful debate. Thank you, Josh. I think it's very important that everybody knows I'm for community interest over special interest. That's my #1 issue right now. There's the state property that my wife and I live a block away, and what's happening up there is a travesty. We have establishment people trying to take this land and give it in a bill to J.B. Riley's company, City Center, and nobody is saying anything about it. I think we were not even invited. The Midway Manor Group, the East Side Association was not even invited to the table. Whatever is done on the Allentown State property, the community should be involved. It's time that we get away from these lobbyists, these politicians that make backroom deals. I assure you I will never make a backroom deal. Transparency is my #1 issue. I am always honest out of my 20 years of public service. And when it's happening out there, is they're rushing this. October 18th, there's a vote. What's the rush? Why not wait for the new legislator to come in? Why are we rushing through this? This is a terrible issue for the east side where I live, and people want to know what's going on up there. I'm not saying J.B. Riley is going to put something bad up there, but how about telling us about what you're going to do? Why wasn't it competitive bidding? Why didn't anybody in this room have a shot at getting that property? Why does it always have to go to an inside track or somebody that went to high school with the legislator? These are issues that got to stop. The lobbyists have so much power in the state legislature, and I promise you I will not be influenced by any lobbyist. I don't take money from any PACs. Every penny I have is from friends, relatives, and my own pocket. I don't take PAC money, special interests from anyone. I will be a maverick. I will be an independent thinker. I will tell Republicans when they're wrong, like this deal at the state property. I will tell Democrats when they're wrong, and I will tell independents. I am a free thinker, and I am beholden to no one. And that's what we need. People are going to stand up to the establishment, stand up to both sides, and make the right decisions. And at the same time, work with both sides. You can't just represent a partisan group, the liberal group, or the conservative group, or just the middle. The Lehigh Valley is the middle. We're the backbone of the country. We're hard workers, every one of us in the family. It's the greatest place to live because we have the greatest families. It's community over special interests, and that's so important for everyone to remember. Diversity is one of our strengths. I'm married to a Honduran lady who's been with me for over 38 years. I'm the right candidate to represent this district. My family is like the United Nations. We have Puerto Rican, we have Afro-American, we have Syrian, we have white, we have everybody covered. Our family right there is Muslim, and I'm proud of them. And I will represent this valley, and I am so happy to be here. And please consider me November 8th. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Siegel?
Thank you. And thanks again to the League of Women Voters for putting this forum together. And thanks again to our lovely high school student for asking us such excellent questions. Look, this is probably the most consequential election in Pennsylvania's history. And as much as we are individual candidates, we are members of parties. And there are values on the line, and there are major decisions to be made. And the truth of the matter is that democracy is on the ballot this election season. There is a MAGA movement in Harrisburg that is intent on making sure that your vote can be overturned when they don't like the election results. They are intent on taking a woman's right away at all costs. They are intent on continuing 40 years of failed trickle-down economics where we cut taxes for the wealthy and cut taxes for corporations and leave the middle class out to hang. Any leader can stand before you and try to acknowledge your pain, try to say that they understand your hurt. Here's the truth. You're owed substance. You're owed specifics. You're owed policy prescriptions. Because no one's going to ever stand before you and tell you that they want your kid to go to a less funded school or a terrible school district. No one's going to tell you they want you to have an inhospitable environment. They're never going to tell you they want you to work for less, and they're not going to tell you they want you to live on unsafe streets. But what they will do is shy away from giving you the specifics, because the specifics can often reveal the subtlety of what they really believe. And I'm the candidate you can trust to make sure that a woman's right to choose will never be called into question in Pennsylvania. That our public education system will do more than just fix what's broken. It'll aspire to new heights, where kids don't have to worry about what they can afford when it comes to getting into education. We're going to make that investment for you. Where our residents can walk on safe streets because we believe public safety is comprehensive. It's not just police, fire, and EMS. It's making sure that we address the root causes of crime in this state, like poverty, lack of health care, housing insecurity. It's about making sure that when you're a worker, you know that the government has your back, because when we build an economy that works for working people and is centered on the middle class, we all do better. And I'd have to ask everybody in this room and anybody in Allentown, do you really feel better off? Don't you see where things are going? We do have a crisis of affordability, and unless we have leaders that zero in on fixing that crisis of affordability, every year is going to get worse for our working families. Rents will continue to rise. Your health care costs will go up. Your child care costs will go up. It'll be harder for those that are living paycheck to paycheck just to make a little bit of difference. And so we need legislators in Harrisburg that understand those problems, that have the knowledge, expertise, and experience to provide specific policy solutions, that offer more than slogans and slug lines, but actually have a plan to make sure that Pennsylvania is a better place for working families, is a place where everyone can afford to pay their rent or be a homeowner, where everybody can afford their health care, where everybody can afford to take time off to get better when they're sick or take care of their family when they decide to start one, to make sure that those that feel left behind finally realize that they have a place, that in our Pennsylvania, everyone matters, that you can love who you want to love, you can be who you want to be, you can worship who you want to worship, and that no one has to live a life of poverty, because I believe that the American dream is what we have to rebuild here in Pennsylvania. Safety, stability, and security for everyone, no matter who you are. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a few dates for you to remember, but before that, I think the candidates certainly deserve a round of applause.